In Acts 1 it says, "They all met together and were constantly united in prayer." In Acts 2:42-47, with the subtitle, "The Believers Form a Community," it says, "All the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship and to sharing in meals, including the Lord's Supper and to prayer." A deep sense of awe came over them all, and the apostles performed many miraculous signs and wonders. And all the believers met together in one place and shared everything they had. They sold their property and possessions and shared the money with those in need. They worshipped together at the temple each day, met in homes for the Lord's Supper, and shared their meals with great joy and generosity, all the while praising God and enjoying the goodwill of all the people. And each day the Lord added to their fellowship those who were being saved. There are a few ideas to draw out from these passages, and I encourage you to study them for yourself. But the overarching message that really comes through is that the believers had formed a community. In fact, in some translations of the Bible, you'll see a subtitle in Acts 2 which says, "The believers form a community," or something similar. The dictionary describes a community as a social, religious, occupational, or other group sharing common characteristics or interests and perceived or perceiving itself as distinct in some respect from the larger society within which it exists. So these Christians were a group of people who were still visible within society, but who were made distinct by unique characteristics and common interests. They were in the world, but they were distinct from the world. What were these common characteristics that made them so distinct? Well, these verses tell us that the people within the community met constantly. In fact, the Bible tells us that gatherings were happening every single day. You see, when people love one another, they naturally want to be together. Since the church was rightly characterized by love, they used to spend a lot of time in each other's company. They created an informal, extended family type of atmosphere. While our modern lifestyles may preclude us from daily gatherings, there should be more of a sense of genuine fellowship among the church, and that should make us distinct. We should be known and recognized by our love for each other. These verses also give us insight into what went on at these gatherings. There was prayer, worship, teaching, fellowship, and food. You may be surprised at how often food is mentioned in relation to the meetings. Indeed, their gatherings often centered around an evening meal in someone's home. People would each prepare something to bring along. There would be meats, vegetables, fruits, cheese, wine, etc., and they would all share in what was brought, enjoying one another's company in the process. In the midst of this eating, there would be a moment of remembrance where bread would be broken and wine would be poured to commemorate the Lord's death and resurrection. When we think of the Lord's Supper today, we think of a tiny square of stale bread and a thimble of juice or wine as part of a silent, structured Sunday morning service. The Lord's Supper as practiced in the early church, however, was an actual meal. Again, it was much more informal. Indeed, in 1 Corinthians 11, it describes so much food and drink being present that some were overindulging and getting drunk. This behavior was rightly condemned by Paul, but it gives some insight into the informality of these gatherings. They were like big, cozy family meals. Also going on at these gatherings were times of teaching, discussion, worship, and prayer. So in this way, the believers experienced complete nourishment of spirit, soul, and body. 1 Corinthians 14 gives us further insight into the dynamics of these meetings, saying, "Well, my brothers and sisters, let's summarize. When you meet together, one will sing, another will teach, another will tell some special revelation God has given. One will speak in tongues, and another will interpret what is said. But everything that is done must strengthen all of you." These verses talk of whole group participation and spontaneity. Paul goes on to say, "Let 2 or 3 people prophesy, and let the others evaluate what is said. But if someone is prophesying and another person receives a revelation from the Lord, the one who is speaking must stop." In this way, all who prophesy will have a turn to speak, one after the other, so that everyone will learn and be encouraged. Remember that people who prophesy are in control of their spirit and can take turns, for God is not a God of disorder, but of peace, as in all the meetings of God's holy people. If there was a problem in Corinth, it was that so many people had something to bring to the group that they were all trying to talk over one another. Paul had to remind them to take turns and to do things in an orderly way. This group participation we read about is a far cry from everyone coming to sit passively, face forward, and then going home. At the Introduction to Christianity courses that we do with the international students, we all gather in someone's home and the host prepares a meal. Generally, there are around 25 to 40 people on any given week. We eat together and have a chat, getting to know one another better and developing friendships. Then we have a bit of worship, maybe just with an acoustic guitar or piano. Song sheets are handed out so that everyone knows the words. And we then move on to some teaching which lasts for about 20 minutes, before breaking into still smaller groups to discuss things. Often these small group discussions centre around the evening's teaching, but just as often the conversations will go off-piste and we end up talking about the real problems and questions that people within the group are currently facing. People can ask any question they want there, and the leaders and mature Christians are spread throughout the groups to provide real answers and direction. I've often thought that this format is actually much closer to the true church than the Sunday morning services. This is the kind of picture the Bible very much portrays in Acts.